Today, the atmosphere in Manchester is one of maximum alert. There are big decisions being taken behind the scenes, a historic record being broken on the pitch, and a very uncertain future in goal. If you blinked, you might have missed the scale of what is happening to Manchester City right now. The feeling is clear. The club is moving key pieces on the board at the same time as it tries to keep dominating the Premier League and fighting hard in Europe. Before anything else, if you live and breathe Manchester City, if your mood changes when the team steps onto the pitch, don't leave it for later. Make sure you follow and turn on notifications, because the idea here is always to bring you everything that's happening behind the scenes, on the pitch and in the market, with as much detail as possible. With that done, let's get into the subject that is keeping a lot of people awake at night, the future of the right-back position. The truth is that internally, City have already mapped out their stance for the next January transfer window, and it goes against what a big part of the fan base was imagining. A lot of people were already dreaming of a lightning-fast announcement, presentation video, that "here we go" echoing everywhere. Except from what is being heard behind the scenes, the reality is the opposite. Hugo Viana, the club's main football decision-maker, does not have bringing in a new right-back this January as a priority, and that completely changes how the situation is read. On the one hand, it is easy to understand the frustration of the supporters. Kyle Walker is no longer a youngster. The schedule is brutal. The Premier League shows no mercy, and the Champions League demands an insane level of intensity in the later stages. You look at the fixture list, see the number of decisive matches in a row, and the feeling is, how can you face all of this without having a ready-made replacement at the same level on the other side? But inside the club, the logic is different. The board see this process as far too delicate a transition to be resolved in a rush, in a short inflated window like the winter one. For months now, City's scouting department have been sweeping the European market in search of fullbacks who can genuinely maintain the team's playing standard. It is no exaggeration to say that almost every relevant league has already been gone through with a fine-tooth comb. Names have appeared, disappeared, and then come back onto the agenda. Geir Truida, from Feyenoord, emerged as one of the first candidates due to his ability to play both in the defensive line and tuck inside, something that is highly valued in the manager's playing model. Andrea Cambiaso, from Juventus, also made the list for being a modern fullback capable of playing several roles with good spatial awareness. More recently, Daniel Munoz, from Crystal Palace, has been closely monitored because of his intensity and aggressiveness in 1v1 situations. But watching is one thing. Pressing the button on a signing is something completely different. And this is where the detail that changes everything comes in. The market knows that Manchester City need a right-back. And when other clubs sense that need, what happens? Prices skyrocket. Any half-promising player starts being treated as if he were the last bottle of water in the desert. They ask for 80, 90, 100 million as if it were the most natural thing in the world, even more so when it is a financially powerful club like City. Within that logic, the board would rather swallow a bit of pressure now than create problems for themselves further down the line. The philosophy has always been to avoid, as much as possible, going crazy in January, except in very specific scenarios. Either when an opportunity appears that is so good it would be irresponsible to ignore it, or when there is an absolute emergency in the squad. And, as much as fans are restless about the right-back role, the club believe the squad still has enough stopgap solutions to get through the season. This is where the puzzle put together by the manager comes in. Abdulkar Kusanov, before his injury, gave very clear signs that he can become an important piece in the squad. He is not ready yet. He is not the definitive player for the position, but he showed personality, stamina, and tactical understanding in big games, which carries a lot of weight behind the scenes. Matheus Nunes, thanks to his versatility, has become a wild card. In some matches, he dropped deeper. In others, he drifted more inside, always trying to plug gaps in the squad. The manager knows it is not the dream solution, but, while the perfect piece has not appeared, he works with what he has in his hand, and that does not mean the club are complacent, quite the opposite. The word echoing around the recruitment department is strategic patience. It is not that they do not see the urgency, it is that they put tactical fit above haste. The idea is to find someone who can, in the medium to long term, take over the role with the same level of trust that the fans have had in Walker in recent years. A fullback who is not only quick and strong, but who understands the game on the inside, knows when to step into midfield, when to hold the width, when to speed things up, and when to slow them down. This type of player is extremely rare and extremely expensive. That is why, whenever the future of the position is discussed, one name always returns to the center of the debate: Tino Livramento. Manchester City's interest in the Newcastle fullback is nothing new. There was a concrete attempt in the last summer window, and many people within English football are convinced that his name was pushed right to the edge of the decision-making table. Technically, Livramento is seen as almost tailor-made for the team's style of play: intense, intelligent, strong in defensive 1v1s, physically robust, and with the quality to combine inside and support on the outside. The problem? A long contract and a tricky context. Livramento is tied to Newcastle until 2028, and the Northeast club have no immediate need to sell. On top of that, with financial fair play squeezing various Premier League sides, any negotiation between big clubs turns into a kind of chess match. The mooted fee is close to 100 million euros, which is hefty even for a club that is used to making big investments. It is not impossible, but it demands calm, calculation, and perfect timing. That is why the time frame is so important. As things stand, everything points to right back being prioritized in the summer window, not in January. The idea is to reach the next preseason with the new starter already in place, or at the very least with the transition underway. Until then, much depends on Kusanov's own development. If he keeps turning in good performances, showing consistency and maturity, he can gain weight in the internal decision-making and ease the pressure for an immediate investment. On the other hand, if his performances dip or new injuries happen, the board may be forced to bring forward moves that, in theory, were planned for further down the road. At the same time, the club continue to track options in markets they usually exploit well, such as the Eredivisie. Younger fullbacks with room to grow and still manageable fees enter the scouting lists. These are players who might initially arrive to bolster the squad, but who could, over time, genuinely compete for the position. Even so, the overall feeling is that Livramento remains the premium target on the list, the name that, if conditions allow, will be given absolute priority. And this is where you, City fan, come into the middle of this whirlwind of information. On one side, the natural anxiety of someone who wants to see the squad always one step ahead, already ready to fight for everything at the highest level. On the other, a board who prefer to ride out the storm, resist the temptation to sort everything in January and bet on a medium-term strategy. In your view, is that prudence or excessive caution? Do you think it is worth persisting with makeshift solutions until the summer? Or is the club taking an unnecessary risk by not investing right now in a big-name right back? Think carefully. Remember the last seasons, the moments when the squad looked a bit thin in certain positions, the feeling that one or two targeted signings would have made all the difference. Now project that into the future. Every decision taken today, especially in such an important position within the system, can directly influence the team's performance on those big Champions League nights and in the decisive rounds of the Premier League. And while the right-back saga drags on, up front there is a Norwegian giant who is not waiting for anyone. Erling Haaland keeps rewriting statistics as if he were playing in another universe, and that crazy match against Fulham is the perfect example. A game that started off looking like a stroll, took on shades of drama, and ended up being marked not only by City's 5 goals, but also by a historic milestone in the number 9's career. At Craven Cottage, in that 5-4 win, Haaland once again etched his name into Premier League history by reaching 100 goals in the competition in just 111 matches. It is a figure that does not make sense when you stop to think about it calmly. You can go back decades in the record books, look at some of the greatest legends ever to set foot on English pitches, and practically no one has managed to sustain this pace. It is as if he were playing in his own league, on a parallel table where only his name appears. But the most frightening part comes afterwards, because beyond this absurd milestone, another statistic emerged that lays bare the level of obsession and discipline Haaland has in his off-the-ball movements. For the first time in more than 2 years, he was caught offside in an away Premier League match. For any ordinary striker, this would be just a footnote. For a player who lives on the shoulder of the last defender, this is almost a scientific achievement. Think about the speed at which everything happens on the pitch. The defensive line steps up half a stride, the pass is played a second earlier or later, the run starts a fraction too soon. Any tiny lack of synchronization, and the assistant referee's flag goes up. Now imagine maintaining for 2 years a level of timing so fine that the number of offsides practically disappears, even while attacking the space all the time. That is not just physical talent. It is reading of the game, study, repetition, training, almost an obsessive fixation on detail. Haaland himself has already made it clear in interviews that he hates being offside. He knows that with VAR, there is no way to fool anyone. Every centimeter is checked, every step is measured, and that forces the striker to adjust his body position, his stride timing, his eye on the defensive line. It is no exaggeration to say that he has turned something many people see as a minor detail into one of the strongest aspects of his game. While other center forwards live in that limbo of getting 1 right and 3 wrong, he stays almost permanently in that perfect zone between what is allowed and what is forbidden. The result shows up not only in the cold numbers, but also in the despair of defenders. How do you mark someone who, besides being strong, quick, and extremely dangerous in the box, also has almost perfect timing when attacking space? If you push your line up too much, he attacks the void in behind. If you drop deep, he receives closer to goal with time to turn and finish. If you try to spring an offside trap, he reads the movement before you and adjusts his body to stay onside. It is a constant nightmare. And all of this is happening while he is still in the process of evolving. Haaland has not reached his peak. He is learning, tweaking, adding new layers to his game. Over time, he is likely to become calmer in his decision-making, even more clinical with the few chances that sometimes appear in big matches, more involved in deeper areas of the pitch when needed. And if, even now, still in a building phase, he is already smashing records, it is inevitable to ask, where is the limit? At this point, I pass the ball back to you, Manchester City supporter. If you had to put together a ranking of the greatest center forwards in Premier League history right now, where would you place Haaland? Does he already make your top 5, top 3? Or, for you, does he still need time, still need more seasons at the very highest level before he can sit at the table with the giants of the past? Think about the feelings he gives you when he is on the pitch, the confidence you feel when you see his name on the team sheet, and answer honestly in your own mind. Now, to round off this complete tour of Manchester City, we step into one of the most sensitive areas for any team that fights for everything, the goal. A lot of people only look at the goalkeeper when he makes a mistake or pulls off a miracle save, but the truth is that the position has become one of the pillars of the club's playing style in recent years. And that is exactly why the recent changes back there carry so much weight, so much doubt, and, at the same time, so much expectation. For a long time, the feeling was one of total stability with Ederson. He wasn't just the first-choice goalkeeper, he was almost a playmaker from the back, a player who completely changed the way the team built from deep. Inch-perfect, long passing, ice-cool under pressure, the personality to take risks when nobody else would. Seeing his cycle come to an end with the move to Turkish football was an emotional shock for a large part of the fan base. As much as everyone knows that, at the highest level, cycles do end, it hits differently when the player in question helped redefine the team's way of playing. Then, just when it seemed the club would follow a more conservative route in terms of replacement, came the plot twist in the final stretch of the window. Almost at the 11th hour, the news breaks. Gianluigi Donnarumma is on his way. A young goalkeeper, but already a full international, a champion, used to the pressure of the biggest stages. All of a sudden, the conversation shifts from, how are we going to replace Ederson, to, What will City look like with Donnarumma at the back? The impact is immediate. He arrives and, without much ceremony, takes over as the number one. In the middle of all this is James Trafford. The youngster, brought through the club, had the feeling that this was his moment. The return to the Etihad seemed, for many, like the beginning of a new era, with a homegrown goalkeeper stepping into the spotlight. But Donnarumma's arrival redrew the board in a way that was almost cruel. From natural heir to the number one shirt, Trafford suddenly becomes just another piece in a scenario where the first-choice keeper already has a consolidated status and a big name in European football. It is easy to forget the human side of this story, but it is there. A young goalkeeper needs minutes, needs to make mistakes and get things right on the pitch, needs to feel he is part of the plan. When that is thrown into doubt, confidence wobbles, and it is exactly at that point that the board has to be cold and clinical. The club cannot afford to lose a homegrown talent purely through poor planning, but at the same time it cannot simply give up a goalkeeper of Donnarumma's caliber at a moment when the sporting demands are enormous. Within this scenario, another key figure appears, Stefan Ortega. Low-key, without making a fuss behind the scenes, he has become a byword for reliability. Whenever he has been called upon, he has delivered solid performances, often in big games, holding the fort without flinching. For any manager, having a backup of that level is a privilege, but at the same time, it is only natural that a player like that wants more. He has made it clear on more than one occasion that he does not want to spend his entire career as a supporting act. He wants the chance to be the number one somewhere. With Donnarumma as the starter, Trafford trying to find his own space and a squad that still includes other options to fill out the position, Ortega's path within the club has become narrower. Rumors of a departure have already surfaced in previous windows, especially if an offer were to appear that would guarantee him the status of first-choice goalkeeper in another project. Even so, the club held on to him, and now, looking at the medium term, the projected picture is clear. The tendency is for Ortega to see out his contract and leave Manchester City on a free in 2026. From the outside, that might look like a financial mistake. How can you let a goalkeeper of that level walk away without bringing in a fee? But on the inside, the reasoning is different. Keeping Ortega until the end of his deal gives the manager huge security over the next few seasons. If anything happens to Donnarumma, if there is an injury, suspension, or fatigue, the backup is someone the team trusts blindly. On top of that, his continued presence buys the club time to decide what to do with Trafford, whether he will be carefully prepared to genuinely become the main understudy to the starter, or whether he will be sold on a permanent deal, perhaps with clauses that allow a buyback further down the line. Meanwhile, another layer of planning is already in motion behind the scenes. The board knows that, as soon as Ortega says his goodbyes, it will be necessary to have a new piece lined up for the long-term role of second-choice goalkeeper. Someone who understands perfectly what it means to be a backup, but who is also good enough to keep the team's level high if called upon. There are possible paths: promoting someone from the academy, bringing in a name from another club within the same group, or going into the market in search of a young goalkeeper with personality and the potential to grow in Donnarumma's shadow. None of these decisions is simple because to tinker with the goal is to tinker with the heart of the team. It is not a position you can change every year without consequences. Every adjustment there affects the defense, the way the team plays out from the back, confidence on crosses and high balls, the center-back's mentality. If the goalkeeper transmits security, the back line plays a step higher, takes more risks, pushes the press up. If there is doubt, everyone drops half a yard, and that completely changes the way the team behaves. When you look at the whole picture, you realize that Manchester City are in the middle of a major silent rebuild. It is not just the right-back role being handled with patience, nor only the goal going through a kind of deep reconstruction. It is a broader process of renewing pieces without losing the identity, of changing pillars of the squad without letting the house shake. Meanwhile, at the other end of the pitch, Haaland keeps ensuring that regardless of the adjustments, the team still has the attacking weight to decide tough matches. It is as if the club were balancing 3 plates at the same time. On one side, the need to plan Kyle Walker's succession intelligently without giving in to market pressure in January. On the other, the obligation to maintain a devastating attack in which Haaland is the absolute protagonist, piling up numbers that sound unreal. And in the background, the reconfiguration of the goal, dealing with the departure of an idol, the arrival of a new leading figure, the discomfort of a promising youngster, and the future of an extremely reliable backup who already knows he is likely to move on in 2026. For the supporter, all of this translates into a mixture of emotions. There is pride in seeing the team at the top, fighting year after year for domestic and European titles. There is anxiety about the future, about how these pieces will fit together in a way that keeps the club competitive in a landscape where rivals are also strengthening, modernizing, closing the gap. Above all, there is a feeling that we are watching a new phase being built before our eyes, piece by piece, season after season. In the end, the key point is understanding that none of these decisions happens by chance. The choice not to rush into the market in January for a right-back, the bet on an elite goalkeeper as the owner of the #1 shirt, the decision to keep an experienced backup until the end of his contract, and the care taken with the development of talents like Kusanov and Trafford are all part of a bigger plan. A plan that, of course, is subject to unforeseen events, but which follows a certain logic, keeping Manchester City at the top for longer without relying on improvised, desperate solutions. And you, who follow everything up close, know how fundamental that is. Because at the end of the day, the trophies we celebrate in May and June are built on these details that seem small in December, January, February. It is in the way the club moves now, how it acts in the market, how it looks after its players, how it manages the squad, that it is decided whether the team will arrive complete and strong for the decisive stages of the season. If you have stayed with me up to this point, it is because you really live Manchester City intensely. So do this. If this content helped you understand better what is behind the headlines, Haaland's statistics, the decisions about the right-back role, and the goalkeeper's future, go ahead and leave a like, because that helps a lot to strengthen our work and to get this kind of analysis out to more fans. And if you still have not done so, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you do not miss any updates, any behind-the-scenes news, or any in-depth analysis about the biggest club in the Premier League.